Good morning, everyone. Good to see everybody. I'm Deborah McGoy, Assistant Vice President of University Relations here at UHD, and I have the privilege of working alongside President Blanchard and other esteemed UHD colleagues to produce these important events. As many of you know, the President's Lecture Series brings together the university community to reflect on topics that are relevant and important to all we serve. The University of Houston Downtown prides itself on being an institution where ideas and perspectives are welcomed and shared. Through these platforms, we create the opportunity for those in our campus community and the community at large to listen to and interact with leaders of industry and policymakers, as well as with local and national experts and UHD alumni. Yay! So that we can each be better informed and equipped to take on the challenges of an ever-changing world. Now, before we begin with our program, I have the honor of introducing the University of Houston's Downtown President, Dr. Lauren J. Blanchard.
Thank you so much. It's always a great pleasure to host these President Lecture Series, but today it even feels more special because, as you just heard, we have one of our alums that's here with us today, and not only an alum that has a last name that sounds familiar to us, Thomason, as in Tommy Thomason, that's his nephew. So I thought I'd bring that a bit of information to you as well, but also recognizing all of the work that he's done with something that forces some of us to have to think back to when we were much younger, and perhaps some of you who are younger don't know anything about it. So you'll be learning today about Butterfly in the Sky, which is an installment of our University of Houston Downtown's President's Lecture Series. So just a bit more about Bradford, who also is known as Brad Thomason. Is it Bradford? Yeah, yes. Mr. Thomason graduated from UHD in 2004 with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in English Language, Literature, and Letters. He is a director, editor, and producer whose work ranges from featured documentaries to short-form commercials and branded content. He is best known for the documentary Jasper Mall, which was nominated for the Grand Jury Prize at the Slam Dance Film Festival, named Best Film of the Year by Ethan Brim of Spoiler Magazine, and won the Best Alabama Film Award at the Sidewalk Street Festival. Mr. Thomason edited and produced Glow, the story of gorgeous ladies of wrestling. That's interesting. Which inspired the next Netflix series entitled the same as A Life in Waves, which inspired the Netflix series entitled the same as A Life in Waves, which was released on Hulu. Today, Mr. Thomason will discuss with us his documentary Butterfly in the Sky, the story of Reading Rainbow, which premiered at Tribeca Festival. I say to you that it forces me to reach back probably to when I was in my early 20s or to somewhere in that area, where I remember Butterfly in the Sky, I Can Fly Twice as High, and went on to inspire kids to take a look. It's in a book. That's all I remember, nothing else. But I'll know far more with that, because the host I remember was LeVar Burton. Reading Rainbow successfully promoted early childhood literacy, and LeVar Burton was really a major part of that. So to learn more about it, let's hear directly from Mr. Thomason himself. And we have the distinct honor of asking him to come and join us. And we've got someone who's going to be interviewing him that is very familiar to all of us, Mr. Mark Cervenka. So I invite the two of them to come forward.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
This is great. Good. Okay. Hi. Thanks, everyone, for being here. We're going to kick this off with the trailer for Butterflies in the Sky, so we get a good taste of that before we start talking about it. So if we can do that now, that'd be great. Thanks.
The lights.
Do you want the Reading Rainbow treatment? Here we go.
Butterfly in the sky, I can go twice as high.
Reading Rainbow was not about learning to read, it was about loving to read.
I said, we will get kids reading more because they will watch Reading Rainbow and they will go get those books. Nobody believed us.
I thought, what a great idea.
Reading is a very fresh way to learn.
Reading Rainbow wanted children to know there's all kinds of stories out there, and while it may not be stories from your neighborhood, it's stories from a neighborhood you should know about.
Roll tape. Ready?
We would all throw ideas in without worrying about how dumb they were or how difficult to achieve they were.
I did everything they asked. I mean, everything. Ow! I became very adamant that since they had hired me, then what they got was me.
He wasn't talking down to you. He was talking as like, let's have this conversation.
It hurts when someone you love dies.
He was on TV as himself, and that's power.
Hi, everybody. This is a book for you.
It was saying, your stories matter. Your voice matters, which means that I get to watch the show and say, maybe I have a voice. Maybe I have an opinion. Maybe I have a story.
But you don't have to take my word for it.
Thank you.
Very cool, Brad.
Thank you, Mark.
I kind of want to start off by getting a little bit of your UHD background here first, and how your partnership with Brett Whitcomb started. So can you talk just a little bit about how you two came together? I know both of you were part of the UHD community.
Yeah, I graduated high school in '97, took a little time off, and then came to UHD and did my entire undergrad here. I met Brett probably about '99, and we were both DJs in Houston. That's what we were doing. We were both DJing at nightclubs in Houston. We both did that for several years, and at some point along the way, we both started to express an interest in film sort of concurrently. And then, in 2006, we just decided to get out and make our first film, which was this film called The Rocket Fire Explosion, which was very much just, we had no idea what we were doing. We put it all on our credit cards and we just made a documentary. And it started to get some attention. By that time, I'd already graduated from here and was considering graduate school and ended up making films full-time instead. But Brett and I worked together here, worked on films together. I mean, I worked in the gallery with Mark I started here as a writing tutor while I was in school, and then I was a student advisor in the advising department, and then I worked as a administrative assistant in the advising department, and that was too much for me. And then I got the job in the gallery, and I think I was in the gallery for 10 years. And Brett and I worked in the gallery together, and we made our first two films essentially while I was working in the gallery, which is crazy for me to think about. But it's like, whatever it was here was fostering all of that, and we both grew from it.
So you majored in English. So did you have thoughts about why you majored in English? I mean, when you came to school, what was your motivation there? And I guess I want to also ask about the courses and instruction that you took and how that may have fed into your filmmaking.
Well, I wasn't the best high school student, to be honest, and I took a little time off after high school and kind of needed to find myself and what I wanted to do. I always liked writing, always liked reading. Those are the things that I was good at, and that I felt very natural doing. Even in high school, I did well in those classes, and I didn't do well at any other classes because I just wasn't applying myself. Thomason, who many of you know, who was mentioned, he was really instrumental, I think, in saying, you can come to UHD, because he had already done he got his undergraduate degree here as well, and then his master's at U of H. And he's like, you can go there, and there's a real sort of freedom to it, and you can kind of keep your life that you're living. And I was living in Montrose, and I just wanted to kind of be in the city, but I didn't necessarily want school to take over everything. And he sort of encouraged me to come here, encouraged me to study English, and I did it. And I just I think that it was so valuable because of mentorship. I mean, I met and developed relationships with so many people. I mean, Mark and I went and walked around the 10th floor on Monday, and of course it's all different, and there's different professors and offices, but I used to go up there in between classes and just say hi to English professors all the time between my classes and just have conversations, just about life and other things I was working on, and things like that. And I think that was incredibly valuable. In addition to the coursework, which was really good, which felt like useful. I mean, we read a lot of really amazing things. I sort of developed a sense of story, I think, from reading all these works. And when I graduated, I went to University of Houston Central Campus for a master's in counseling, because I thought maybe I'd want to be a counselor or a therapist of some sort. And we ended up making our first film in that time period, and I just kind of decided that I wanted to go make films instead of pursue that graduate degree. But it was interesting because the sort of confluence of English and counseling really helped with documentary filmmaking, because when you sit down with someone and you're asking them in a very short time to open up and share with you, you have to employ some of those skills that I was learning in the counseling program. So it kind of just all fed into this world, and then at some point it was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make films.
So were there particular courses or writers that you were drawn to that you felt like kind of really hit home for you?
Now you put me on the spot.
I did.
Gosh.
Chuck Jackson's over there going.
Yeah. I never took a class with Chuck though. Yeah. So we didn't have a class. Let me think. Well, I believe we read Marquez in a class. We read 100 Years of Solitude in a class, and that really jumped off for me. I started reading all of his books and really got fascinated with that and sort of the storytelling and the character building and the world building, and really got fascinated with magic realism in general, which I don't know that we've been able to necessarily employ in documentary as much, but I really love that as the type of literature that I like to read. Let me think about that.
We'll come back to it.
Okay.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
So, what was the initial draw to reading Rainbow?
I think, like most people who find their way to the film, we grew up watching it. So, we watched the show, and but our memories were of a couple of things. The song, as you said, I mean, you never forget that. And then I had very vivid memories of LeVar Burton's earring. He wore an earring, and I thought that was the coolest thing. PBS was cool, but it wasn't cool. But that was cool. I mean, my parents weren't going to let me have an earring, and the dude on the reading show has it. So I remember that, and Brett and I were just talking one day, and we were like, wow, has anyone made the Mr. Rogers doc had come out, and we were like, has anyone made a Reading Rainbow doc? That seems like it'd be a good story. And no one had. And so we started reaching out to the people who made the show, who, if you've seen the film or if you plan to watch it, there's all these incredible people who, poured their life into making this film because they cared about children. I mean, a lot of the people who made the show were teachers and so forth. But they were all totally on board and excited to tell their story. And then, of course, we had to get LeVar Burton. If we didn't have LeVar Burton, we couldn't make the film, because who would want to watch that? So, once we started hearing their stories, once we got LeVar Burton, we knew we had a film on our hands, because everyone was so passionate about their time working on the show.
Right. So there were a lot of celebrities that were a part of that show, and you reached out to a lot of those, and a lot of the tech people and producers and different people. So when you first reached out to them, what was their response to you about wanting to do the documentary?
Well, LeVar, we had to go through he has like a company, LeVar Burton Entertainment, and there's a CEO to that company, and that's who we reached out to first. And we made a pitch deck for the film. It's like a 20-page deck, all colorful and full of our ideas and photos and comps and things that we thought the film could be like, and shared it with her, basically pitched her and said, this is why we want to do it. We think we're the right people to do it for this reason, and we're really passionate about it. And she said, okay, I'll talk to LeVar and get back to you. And then we didn't hear from her for a couple weeks, and then we get a call out of nowhere, and she says, hey, LeVar's going to call you in 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I got, where we were living at the time, I had bad cell service, so I got in a car and drove to the nearest grocery store parking lot where I could get full bars on my phone because I didn't want to have any issues. And he called us, and the minute we heard his voice, we didn't know how to, you just don't know how to process that, on the phone, and we just kind of collected ourselves. And then he was like, hey, Sangeeta briefed me, I read your deck, I checked out your other work, and I feel like you're the right people to tell the stories, so just let me know what you need. And then from that point forward, it was like, we're off. So he was great, and he gave us an incredible interview. We traveled with the film at festivals for 2 years, and he came to events, and he did things, and he complimented my jacket once. That's cool. So he's an awesome guy. Whoopi Goldberg, honestly, she didn't really remember much from the show. Which makes sense to me. Her career is just baffling, how long she's been working and how many things she's done in her career. So we kind of had to walk her through some memories ourselves. But again, eager to talk to us because it's just such a good, worthy cause. Encouraging kids to read. It's hard to miss. So
yeah. So in the beginning of the documentary, one of the points that's made is that people were understanding that children were watching television way more than they were reading. And one of the questions was, or one of the things discussed was how to bridge that gap. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you think that might have been, really prominent in the show's history?
Yeah, I think that Sesame Street had already started to lay a lot of groundwork for how to use the television as an educational tool. So they had the research and the work that was being done over there, and I think they could draw on that. But I think their big challenge was, how do we get books back into children's hands using this medium, television, that is on paper opposed to reading, because you're not reading if you're watching a TV. And I think the idea of sort of bringing the books to life and doing their rudimentary sort of animation they did on the show was just really huge. And it's they have their own statistics on how much it worked because of children's book sales, and they started putting these Reading Rainbow stickers on books. And I know for me, when I was a kid, those are the books that I wanted. I was like, oh, I saw that on Reading Rainbow, I want that book. So I think it worked, but I think that it was certainly, and in the film, they talk about it in greater detail, but it was certainly not, it wasn't an easy sell in the beginning, to say, we're going to encourage kids to read through the television. But the research that led to the show sort of found that in the summertime, kids were not, they would sort of stop reading, and their reading comprehension would slow as they were not in classes and not reading with their class. So Reading Rainbow was also sort of looked at it as a way to just encourage reading over the summertime, and that's how it started. And then of course it grew and grew, and it was on the air for 25 years.
So one of the really, for me, one of the great fun things about the show was the kid reviews, book reviews. So when you were a child and you were watching this, did that ring like, oh, okay, this kid's my age and really likes it. I'm going to go with that. Or, was that a important part of the show for you?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say absolutely. I can't sort of recall being conscious enough of that, but the show in general and just its impact means I know that I sat and watched it. I know that I watched those kids give those reviews, and I'm pretty positive that seeing someone my age tell me to read something or to check something out, or that something might be cool, all in their own words. I mean, that's certainly an inspiring thing. And, we tracked some of those kids down. There's 4 of them in the film. And they're also very eager to talk about their time on the show. But, even behind the scenes, they really made an effort to make sure that what they were getting from the kids was an authentic review. So, they of course, they kind of helped shape it into something that was quick and, manageable from their time perspective. But they also let the kids sort of really put down their initial feelings about the book on paper, because they felt like that's the only way to speak the truth. So, I think that's an incredible. It's a simple innovation, but it's a pretty incredible one, I think.
Yeah, I mean, in the film, if you guys haven't seen it and you're going to stay and watch it, you get to see some of those kids talk about their favorite books and give these reviews, and they're so animated, and they're like, yeah, you got to read this book, and all this, and it's the best book ever, and it's just fabulous, and they're like 8 years old and doing this, and then they interviewed these children now as adults, and them thinking back on that and how important that was for them. To kind of,
we still call them book review kids, even though they're grown-ups now. And I would be like, "Hey, the book review kids are here." And oh, sorry, you're not a kid anymore. But in my mind, they are. It's interesting.
One of the other things about the show is that, and a lot of people talk about this that you interviewed, was that you're seeing people that look like the people who are watching. Yeah. There's a lot of diversity and kind of, that it opened up book reading, I guess, to pretty much anybody who could sit in front of a television.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, so my mom, my mom is first generation American. So, and my grandmother was born in Mexico, and we lived in Southeast Houston for much of my childhood. And so the world around me was often not reflected in television. I mean, honestly, but Reading Rainbow, it was. In fact, I distinctly remember watching, you saw the Run DMC episode in there, but also there was an episode with Los Lobos where LeVar Burton is in like a barrio in LA, and he goes and has like, a picnic with them, and they play music. And, that was just pretty powerful stuff. And the shows, I think it tried really hard to make sure to choose books by a diverse set of authors, sort of reflecting a diverse set of storytelling. And then in turn, when the show would go out into the world, which, by the way, that's Reading Rainbow, right? It's a book, and then it's a kind of mini documentary on a book. So that, and Brett and I didn't realize that until a little bit later. We were like, oh wow, Reading Rainbow is documentary for kids, and because it is. It's as soon as they finish that book, LeVar's somewhere talking to someone or engaging in some way or going into a bat cave, as you'll see in the movie and never forget, or going whaling, or going and he goes to the Taos Pueblo and talks to people there. It's basically documentary for kids, and it's global. Of course, they only filmed in the U.S., but they really tried to show different facets of the country, and I think that was also incredibly valuable. Yeah.
Can I do a little aside here? Sure. You mentioned your mom, disco.
Oh, my mom. Well, my mom was a singer in Houston when I was growing up. So I grew up around music, and so she recorded a few records here when I was very young, all in Spanish. But that part of my life, I think, really encouraged a love of music. And you'll see in the film, there's a whole scene where the theme song was written on this really complex synthesizer. And we've got the guy who composed it, and he sort of walks you through writing those first sort of flutters at the beginning of the theme song. And that kind of stuff, like music related. I also did some scoring for our first couple films, like comes from growing up around my mom, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Choices, you know, as a documentary filmmaker, there are a lot of choices you have to make. First, I want to ask, why documentary rather than doing fiction?
I think it was a practical choice in the beginning. I think that we wanted to make a feature film. And I think, because short films are really great and they're really fun, but they play festivals, maybe, and then they just kind of don't have a lot of life after that. Like there's not a lot of places for short films to go and for people to consume them. So we wanted to make a feature, and we had no money. Mm-hmm. And documentaries are, I think, you know, they have a journalistic quality, obviously, and they allow for a lot more flexibility in the quality of presentation. I think if you can take a crappy camera and no lights, and if you find a character or a subject, a person who is engaging and compelling, then you can win. I mean, one of my favorite documentaries of all time is called Hands on a Hard Body, and it's just a documentary filmed somewhere in Texas about about a contest where people put their hand on a truck, on a Nissan pickup truck, and whoever keeps their hand on it the longest gets to win that truck. And I know it's a funny premise, but and it's filmed kind of amateurishly, and it's got its quality. It's kind of quirky and weird, but by the time that thing's over, I mean, the characters, the things that come out of that, it ends up being this incredible human journey. Like, and you just can't believe what where people are going mentally and what's happening. So that's just an example, but I think we knew we could make a feature with very little money if it was a documentary. So that's what we did. We got a cheap camera, we got a couple of lights, and we started driving all over and made that first film. And just, I've never really, since we started that, I've never really had a huge draw to be a narrative filmmaker. I've written some stuff, but it's not really on my list as much,
So you mentioned amateur, you're a professional now. What's that arc like? How do you get there? What was your story about moving into where your films are now on Netflix? I mean, that's a big question.
Yeah,
but kind of.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that at some point you have to figure out, you can't make all the films like you do that first one, right? Because it's just not sustainable to do everything and to work for free and to do all these things forever. So you have to learn the business side a little bit, and I think that's been a big part of growing, is sort of figuring out what, at least assuming what you're worth, and it becomes more about coming up with an idea rather than coming up with an idea and then just running out and shooting it like we used to. You have to come up with an idea, and then you have to figure out how to get money for it, and then you can go shoot it. And I think that that's been a bit of a journey, because I feel creatively driven all the time, but the medium that I work in is so dependent on money that I can't just be creative. I mean, I can't just be creative. So I edit other people's films. I edit commercial work and stuff like that for a living, which is great. I think film is great because there's so many different aspects of filmmaking that you can find one of them that's a part of your art side. I have an art side and I have a work side. And editing, I do editing in both sides, but it's nice to be able to have that skill and use it to make money. But I think it's just like figuring out like who your team is, your collaborators, and learning more about what it takes to make something and what it's going to cost and how it's going to be practical. And then even still, if you find yourself in a place where you can't get something made, then you figure out a way to make something, I think. And so that's where we are. Yeah,
so we worked together daily for close to 10 years, right? And I remember the first time I saw one of your films on Netflix, I was like, wow. I mean, that must have been a great feeling. I mean, is it as, I don't know, kind of empowering to you as it is, kind of to, and other platforms, not just Netflix, but yeah.
Well, we really love people to see the films. I mean, it's obviously it's great, if you can get if you can make money making films, that's fantastic. But if we make something and we spend, most of these documentaries take 2 years. So if you spend 2 years on something, you just want it to get to a place where the most people can have their eyes on it, And right now that's Netflix, so that's great with this film that it's found its way there. But it took 2 years to find its way there. So, it's a long road sometimes, but our ultimate goal is to just have it up there, and then of course it feels amazing. People send me messages like, "Hey, I saw a butterfly in the skies on Delta Airlines." I'm like, "Oh, that's great. Watch it." So it's a cool feeling for sure. So
yeah. In the documentaries of yours that I've seen, you don't ask questions on camera, so. I want to ask you about how when you're interviewing someone and you get this hour-long interview on tape or whatever, are you asking them questions and then you're just putting the answer? How do you edit that? How do you construct that? What is your creative way of thinking about an interview and what you do once you have it?
Well, I think we tend to make two different kinds of films, like Butterfly in the Sky, the Glow film that was mentioned earlier. Those are more sort of traditional archive and talking head interview driven documentaries, and they're telling a story that's already happened. So when that's the case, you have a lot more sort of scaffolding, I guess, when you're building the idea, because the story you have to tell. You sort of have a debt to tell a particular story. Not necessarily in a particular way, although you want to make sure it's coherent and people aren't, confused or lost. So in that case, we go into those interviews with questions, asking questions to serve the story that we think we're going to tell. I've been waiting to sit in a university to say this, but for a long time. But documentary, you don't make documentaries. Documentaries make you. I said it. Thank you. Yeah. Because no matter how much you plan, no matter how much you think you have your outline, no matter how much you think you have your story beats and your act structure and everything, someone's going to sit down and drop some bomb on you, and then you're just going to have to work that into the story, And then that sort of disrupts your ideas, and then you start building around that. Oh, you've got 6 more people to interview. Well, now we've got to ask all them about that, and then you step back and you get home and then you start building it. The other kind of film we make is more of what's like a cinema verite style, observational, which is what Jasper Mall is, and the most recent film that we finished is, and those are much more like embedding with people and sort of like basically filming scenes with people to build like a larger sort of real slice of life kind of story. And those are very different in that you cut a scene. You're only going to include in a scene what you filmed within a scene. So you're not like pulling footage from other areas and putting it on top of that. You're just filming your scenes, and then it's about sort of structuring them in a way that makes cohesive narrative sense. And those are even more interesting because often we try not to interview people at all. You're trying to just film real life, or you're doing interviews, but you're hiding them. You'll have somebody doing something and you'll ask them some questions and it'll feel very real and natural because they're busy, So those are the two ways we approach it, and both ways are daunting in their own way. The edit is, usually you're spending 6 to 9 months on an edit, and for a feature doc. So it's the hardest part, but it's also the part that I love to do the most.
So what bombs were dropped in Butterfly in the Sky?
Let me see. We just. It was relatively bomb free. I think I think that we just kept kind of uncovering the passion that we were trying to explore from everyone. LeVar had his challenges on the show, some of which we had read about and some of which we hadn't, and we talked to him about those, and he was very candid about all that. I didn't know. Well, I don't want to spoil the movie if people haven't seen it. So, but we found out there were a few things related to Star Trek. So if you watch it, you can see. He's Geordie LaForge too. So.
Yeah. So one of the things that, and I don't know, maybe it's just endemic to spending time with people on film, or not, but the character, I don't know, say character development, the way we get to know the people who appear throughout the documentary. By the time we're done, I mean, especially in all of them, but in this film, by the time we get to the end of it, we get a good sense of an emotional response from those people, a sense of what their concerns were, what their character was like, why they were involved, and kind of feel like we know them a little bit. Is that, I mean, how do you do that?
Well, I think on the front end, it's kind of like you really need to get there and develop a rapport and trust and all that very quickly and feel comfortable. If I'm sitting, I'm usually the one conducting the interview. So if I'm sitting across from someone and we feel very comfortable and there's like a really great dynamic and I just feel that they're not hiding something from me or holding back, then I know that's going to translate onto the screen, and that's going to give us. It's going to make it easier for us to use the 5 times or whatever they pop up in the film to achieve what you're talking about. Like there's enough truth and honesty and transparency in their interview that just the first time you see them and they give you a little bit of who they are, you start to connect, and then it grows as the film goes on because you're also attaching them to the narrative then, and you're engaged with their story based on the larger story. So I think that goes back to the little bit of time I spent in the counseling program, like just kind of being able to sit and have this active empathy with the people that I'm talking to. And we also try to keep our crew small. I mean, I think that's another thing that's important. With the Verite stuff in particular, a lot of times it's me and I have the boom mic and Brett has the camera and that's it. And, and it's just the two of us and there's no lights and we try to use natural light. And even with the interview stuff, it's like, how can we keep this crew very small so that people don't feel super intimidated by all these lights and big, clunky cameras and things, because that can take people out too. So yeah. I think it's just about gaining trust and then that translating onto the screen.
Have you had a moment when you've tried to interview someone or talk with someone and it's just not working? It's just kind of like pulling teeth?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've definitely had some interviews that just stayed on the cutting room floor because they just didn't feel. Yeah. Either they didn't work, they didn't serve the narrative. Any of the answers we got didn't serve the narrative, or just you could just kind of tell that this person maybe wasn't interested in sharing as much as maybe they had thought. It happens. Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to talk about what. So you mentioned about 2 years for a project. Mm-hmm. So when did you start with Reading Rainbow, and when did that finally finish?
We started in 2020. That's my wife, Allie. She did the animation in the film that if you watch it, it's amazing and beautiful. It took her just as long to do 1.5 minutes of animation as it took me to make the film. So that tells you anything about animation. But yeah, 2020, we worked on the film for about 1.5 years, which is pretty quick, actually. We had that one done pretty fast because we had a really good, larger team, like helping, and good support financially. And then it premiered at, I believe, in June of 2022 at Tribeca, and then it took us just under 2 years to get it onto Netflix. So, all told, you're looking at like 3.5 years that this film has been, kind of a part of my life. But, it ebbs and flows. You finish and that's a victory, and then you do the festival and that's a victory, and then you kind of worry, and then things get better, and so yeah.
So when you decide on a new film, it's a big commitment. So how is it that you do you and Brett sit down and talk about this and kind of I mean, what's the process like for your next project? And what is your next project?
So yeah, we come up with ideas. We're always bouncing ideas off of each other, and most of them don't stick, but occasionally something does. But at any given time, I mean, we probably have a list of 5 or 6 things that are just kind of have come up, and maybe I've reached out to a couple of people to see what who we might have access to or things like that. In the time that we waited to get Butterfly in the Sky out in the world, we made another documentary, like a slice of life, like I was talking about, like more like Jasper Mall, and it's about this town in Oregon called St. Helens. And there was a Disney Channel original movie film there called Halloween Town, we weren't necessarily nostalgic for Halloween Town like we were for Reading Rainbow, but what we were nostalgic for was Halloween, and we always wanted to make a Halloween documentary, and we could never quite find an end. So when we found that this town basically adopted the identity of Halloween Town just because a movie was filmed there, and like 50,000 people travel there every year to see the real Halloween Town, we decided to go there and make a doc. And that was just our entry point. Like we don't really mess with Disney's IP, so we just got in there and started filming locals and their sort of quirky journeys. And so it's very much a slice of life, very different than this film. But we love it nonetheless. And it just premiered like 5 days ago at Fantastic Fest in Austin. So I've been in Texas now for like 2 weeks, but yeah.
Yeah. And so what's next?
We don't know what's next.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what has just happened. And we're in that place where we haven't settled on a new film just yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're in Los Angeles now.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, drink water. You were in Alabama for a while, and now you're in Los Angeles. And Brett's still in Alabama, correct?
That's correct, yeah. And we work, we do, if we're going, like when we went to Oregon to film that, we got an Airbnb up there and stayed there for several weeks filming, and then I stayed up there and edited for several more weeks. And we communicate every day, just remote sharing cuts and talking, yeah.
So I wanted to ask if you and Brett feel like there are connective themes between all of, or many of the docs that you choose to do. Is there an underlying premise?
Yeah, I think that we tend to mine things that affected us or inspired us as young people. I think that on a very base level, it's nostalgia, but we're not necessarily interested in nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. We really like to explore these things that inspired us as young people, and then kind of peel back whatever the curtain for those things is like in the present day. So, in the case of Jasper Mall, we spent 8 months in a dying shopping mall, because we went to malls when we were young, and they were a huge part of our life. Third Space, the whole thing, and now they're all mostly dying. And so we found this mall, and it was, several stores had closed, but it was still open, and there was this new kind of culture there, like mall walkers and things that, you don't really think about. And we just embedded and made this film that kind of ends up being this portrait of, it's a portrait of a small town shopping mall, but it's about more than that. It's like about community and economy and all kinds of things that we don't ever mention. And same thing, Butterfly in the Sky, we love Reading Rainbow. The Rockefeller Explosion, our very first film, was about...
Can you tell folks what that's about, just real quickly?
I'm old, but when I was a kid, there was a pizza place called Showbiz Pizza that ended up becoming Chuck E. Cheese. Eventually.
Yeah, we're seeing lots of nods here. You're not that young.
Okay. Well, Showbiz Pizza and this was a truly a gallery discovery. Sorry to say this, but I was looking at YouTube in the gallery. There used to be an animatronic rock band of animals that played in Showbiz Pizza, like this big, giant, crazy, scary, weird things. And I was looking at YouTube, and some guy in Alabama had somehow gotten a whole pristine set of those things and had programmed them to play like Usher's "Love in This Club" and Miss New Booty.
Nuts.
So that's real, and then the videos were up there, and then there was some little video of him like saying, "Hi," he had a real Southern drawl, and he was kind of saying, I love these animals, and I programmed them, and I just was like, and Brett and I had been kind of experimenting with film and talking about it, and I called him and I was like, hey, I think this is a film. I don't know what this film is, but I think this is a film.
Yeah.
So we went and talked to him, but then again, the whole documentaries make you thing. When we talked to him, thinking he was going to be the main character and that he was going to be the story, and maybe even thinking it would be a short film, which we didn't want to do, he connected us to the guy who invented that whole band and like had built the whole company from when he was a young man, and like it was. And then we found this whole story of his journey, and then the other fans. It became a story of fandom a little bit. It became a story of like holding on to childhood, and it's all kinds of a mess. I mean, we had no idea what we were doing, and there's a lot about it that I look at and I go, oh God, I would have done that differently, or oh gosh, cut, no, okay, But the characters are there, and so because the characters are there, people watch it, and it got a limited Blu-ray release last year, and people watch it and they love it, and I have a soft spot for it because of obviously because it's our first film, but also because I love the characters too. So that was the beginning of that journey, and then same thing with Glow, and we just kind of kept doing that.
Maybe one more question, but
Sure.
Even with Glow and that whole Hollywood hype of this TV show that was created to kind of showcase women's wrestling, and there was a lot of camp in it and all of that. But what's amazing to me is how you're able to have a level of respect for all the people that you're talking with. Sure. And I find that in all of the, I guess that is just part of how you work with people, but maybe just a little discussion about that.
Yeah, with Glow's a good example, because when we first set out to make that film, like the immediate thing we'd get, when people heard Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling was like, what? Like, oh my gosh. Of course, now we feel validated because Netflix did they did a Glow series and basically told the same story we did, but, in this big, huge budget, multi-part series, and everybody loves it. So I feel good about Glow, but, I think that they had spent their entire lives, the women that we interviewed for that show, or for that film, they were on the show the show only lasted like 4 years back in the early or mid 80s. And, they had spent a little bit of time kind of hiding from it, because they were sort of like, I guess maybe a little ashamed that they had done it, even though we always looked at it as this kind of like really cool, empowering thing that these, many of these were actresses who were trying to get a gig and were like, here's a chance you can act, you'll be acting and wrestling. And they said yes, and they learned to wrestle, and then they did it. We thought that was really cool. And it was funny, and it was campy and cheesy, and it's pretty lowbrow, but that didn't matter to us. What mattered to us was the individuals who were a part of it and what their journey was. And I think that's the key, right? Is like, I feel like the entry point is the entry point, and Glow's a good entry point. We had a lot of, whether people liked it or not, a lot of people did remember it, so it was a nice sort of built-in audience already. But then once you talk to the people, you realize that it's just, everybody has a journey, and if you can tell these stories that have all this color surrounding them and something really interesting like Glow, you just get to the essence of something really human that I think people can connect with, and we're always looking for that. I think we're always looking for that.
Yeah. We're going to open up for questions. I want to ask you one more thing, and so your arc from going and doing all of these things, your foundation at UHD, what do you take from UHD as being kind of a something that's really been foundational for you in terms of your filmmaking?
Yeah, well, I loved it here. I mean, I've said this before. I mentioned it earlier, but I felt like my experience in this campus and with the professors was just, it was intertwined in my life outside of school in a way that really worked for me. And I just, I don't know. There was never a time when I didn't want to come here. I mean, obviously I worked here too, so I was always here. But
and you didn't want to come here. Right?
What's that? Well, some mornings were rougher than others, but yeah. Sorry, I was late. That sometimes. So.
10 years.
Yeah, but I mean, incredible professors, incredible mentorship, and just feeling. I don't know. I felt a sense of community. I made a lot of friends who are still, my friends here. Obviously, I was working with one of my best friends, with Brett, and I just really enjoyed being here. I mean, I would walk home. I mean, there'd be days, and I know only during the fall, but because it's too hot. But I would just kind of make downtown be a part of my life, and because I'm such a culture hound and I'm so interested in everything that's around me in terms of making films, it was just nice to tie my college experience into that. And I felt like I got a lot of opportunities in the classroom to learn and grow, but outside of the classroom too, because I was working as a writing tutor and an advisor assistant and stuff like that. I just became very engaged in the community here, and I go play basketball in that building that's closed now. So I love that. But yeah, I think that I wouldn't trade it, for anything. I mean, those first two films, we made them not while I was a student, but, while I was here. And I don't know, it fostered a good environment for being creative.
I remember you working on them, and yeah. Kind of filling in on that, how that was going, and it was really fascinating. And
not in the office though, because
not in the office, no.
Because we had PCs. I work on a Mac, and there it's PCs.
Yeah, it's all Mac. But it was just fascinating to see the growth and kind of you reaching for your dream and getting there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much.
It's ongoing for sure, but I'm grateful for everyone here too. So
yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
And we have some time for some questions. If there are any Reading Rainbow alumni out there, anybody who wants to ask anything about filmmaking, now's your time. So, who's got a question? So wait, we need a microphone because we're on camera. So
I wanted to ask, how did it feel for you, first doing your film? How was that experience for you versus now doing a film? With sponsorships and experience?
Well, I mean, having support is really important. There's also just so many efficiencies in the process now that we didn't have back then. I mean, I feel more connected to the, even to the software. I'm a better editor. I'm better at a lot of things that I do on these projects, and we have more support. And I think that helps streamline a lot of things, and that's really wonderful and incredibly helpful. I think on the flip side of that, though, it's important to sometimes reflect back on those times when every part of the process was instinctual, because you do lose that eventually. You do sort of those efficiencies and the techniques you develop, and even just thinking in terms of 3-act structures and things that you learn as you go. It's important to reflect on how it was to just do it, So I think to answer your question, it's different in that it's easier in a lot of ways, but it's also challenging in a lot of ways because you have to sort of remind yourself that you're doing it for the art and not just for the money and all these other things that there's no money, but no, you're doing it for the art and that's super important. So I hope that answers your question.
On your earlier works, you mentioned it's only really you two, but on your later works, do you have a sound editor after the fact or a Foley artist?
Well, I should have clarified that. It's oftentimes only me and Brett in the field. When we're actually shooting the film. In post, we have a team. The two main post production components to any feature film are your sound mix, which you have to have done after the fact, and your color timing, or the color processing. So that, when you shoot the film, it's not colored. It's like it's flat and milky looking, and a colorist takes it and makes it pop. So we always hire out for those things. Those are very technical things to do, and by the time we're done shooting and editing a film, the last thing we want to do is do something like that, because it just won't be done well, because we're already tired of it. But those are important aspects, though, and we've always, even in the beginning when we had no money, we figured out a way to get somebody to do those things for us. Yeah.
So with your agreement with Netflix, I was just curious if you're, the 2 years that you spent getting that done, are you working with an aggregator or a agent, or are you working directly with Netflix representative? We premiered at Tribeca in 2022, and out of our premiere, we had a sales agent whose job it was then to go shop it to all the places, Netflix included. They couldn't sell the film, and we had a contract with them for a year, and then that contract ended. And then when our contract ended with that sales agent, whose responsibility it was to go sell the film for us, we kind of stepped back and tried a new approach. And we got a theatrical booker who helped us do a little theatrical run with Butterfly in the Sky. We played like 25 AMC theaters, and then maybe another 20 art houses. And that generated a little buzz. And then basically that theatrical booker was able to kind of take us directly to Netflix, and they licensed the film for 2 years. So that's how it happened. So it wasn't through a sales agent technically, which was great, because they take a percentage. But it was with help. It's really, you can't go to Netflix. The filmmaker can't just go to Netflix and say, here's my film. It used to be that way. Rockafire, I think we filled out some form and sent them a DVD, and then it was up. But, it was a very different world than now. It's incredibly competitive. And it's, we were just over the moon that it got on there. But yeah, it was more of an independent release, and it's a whole other conversation. It's boring, but the documentary world is, film in general, there's a lot of questions about, how you sell something, and some places are buying and some places aren't, and it's getting more challenging, but we're sort of figuring out how to navigate that independently, so.
I don't have a question, but I want to say I did watch the film. I'm definitely your target audience. I grew up watching the show. I want to say what it did for me was that it really opened my eyes to what we took for granted in the time we were watching the show, which was LeVar Burton he was just cool. And like you said, he was just there. But now I realize what a total gem he is. And I think you also opened up our eyes to the fact that the show was so innovative and so different. And I was one of those kids where in school we were actually saying in the classroom, you don't have to take my word for it, when we were doing presentations. So it was an integral part of my growing up, and I adored the film. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, got some over here.
So my question to you is, what type of advice would you give to our current or prospective students who want to venture into your career field?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think that there's two things. One, I think, make a film. Whatever that looks like, whatever kind of camera you can get your hands on. Watch some YouTube videos about, how things are supposed to look, or watch a lot of documentaries, or whatever you want to do. If you want to do narratives, that's fine too, but watch films, sort of really get yourself connected with
what film language is and how shots work together. I mean, Brett, who shoots all our films, he shoots, I edit. I mean, he used to watch films with the sound off just to kind of get a sense of how images were connecting, completely independent from everything else. And there's so many resources now that weren't there even when we started. And there's so many ways to make stuff look really good. I mean, we started before the DSLR era, which is like taking a film camera style with the interchangeable lenses and being able to shoot video with that really kind of changed everything, because you could make something look cinematic for very cheap. So that's all there. Figure that out. Make a film. It's going to be bad. That's okay. And I think that's one side, which is just be fiercely creative and do something, find some characters or find something and tell a story. And the other side is, if you start to decide this is something you really want to do, then learn the business side too, because even if you're not employing it yet, even if even if there's no opportunities at your door to sell anything, figure out how you fit into that, because I think that's hugely important. You also learn that you can do everything for a while, but ultimately it's not the best idea to do everything always, because there's so many roles in a given film that it's nice to have collaborators who you can work with and hand off duties to. Or when Brett and I have a lead producer, if we're both directing and I'm editing and he's shooting, and we have a really good lead producer who's handling all that other stuff, the communication with other people and stuff, that's a dream. When we're having to do that too, that's really challenging. So I'd just say, learn the business and make a film. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, during the documentary, did you look back to your favorite Reading Rainbow episode? Because I know I can remember, I can recite my favorite book from Reading Rainbow.
Yeah.
Did you have a similar experience?
Oh yeah, well, there were two. One of them wasn't in the film. One book that was featured on an episode was a book called Miss Nelson is Back, which is it's about a teacher who gets so frustrated with her students that she goes and then disguises herself as some witchy substitute. I loved that book when I was a kid. And there's an episode on that. And then there's one of our favorite book review kids talks about the Frog and Toad books, which I love very much. So I remember those. And then a lot of my memories were with early LeVar stuff. I mean, I remember him going to Whale Watch, and that was really cool. And they go to a volcano, and I remember seeing that, and it was really fun to revisit. I mean, there are 140 something episodes of Reading Rainbow, and I watched almost all of them. So almost. Just trying to find, what we needed to support the stories we were getting, but also just trying to find clips of LeVar not talking so I could use his face, which was hard because he talked most of the time. But it was really great to revisit the show.
Speaking about the business aspect of things, how important was it for you to do that film festival circuit? Go into Tribeca and go into all these places. How important is that for a documentary filmmaker?
Yeah, I think that's a question with an answer that's evolving. I think that when we first started, I think film festivals were hugely important, and I think that if you got into a Sundance, or a Tribeca, or like a Cannes or a South by Southwest, then you were probably going to sell your film out of that festival, and you were probably going to have it out in the world. That seemed much more like a given back then. I think that the streaming platforms have sort of changed the industry a little bit, and so many films are being created from within where we consume them. So Netflix is, they're making things from the ground up. That has no reason to go to a festival. And if it does, and sometimes they do, then I'm at the festival like, why is this here? It's already sold. It doesn't need to be here, It doesn't need to get distribution because it already has it, So we get a little bit testy about that. But, I think that all that aside, all the business stuff aside, I like film festivals because the community, you meet a lot of people.
you can connect with other filmmakers, you can connect with people in the business. That's really useful. And then I like for people, we're in a decreasingly theatrical film environment. Like, a lot of films, documentaries especially, don't play theaters very much. So it's really nice to be able to go to a film festival and see your documentary on the big screen with a crowd. I mean, that's really valuable. And it's not just valuable in that it feels good, it's also valuable in that, you might change something after you watch it with a crowd. If you're like at your premiere and, you're seeing it for the first time in a group and you're like, ooh, this part's not really working. Maybe you make some changes. It's just important to watch your film with people, and festivals allow that. And then the other stuff that I mentioned was more of a given. It's still there. It's just a little harder. But a lot of the bigger festivals like Sundance, like South by Southwest, distributors will go, they will look for films, and they'll buy a few. So, if you can get into those, then that can be big for your film. Yeah. Oh, you're good.
So in that pitch for Butterfly in the Sky, what was the most important thing that you wanted to add in it? So like when you send out the pitch deck, like what did you think was?
I think different people are looking at different things. If you're putting the deck in front of people to get money, then they're looking to see what are comparable films that have done well, like yours. So you put in there, like in ours, it was like, Won't You Be My Neighbor? Like look how well this film did, and look at this film that did really. These are comparable documentaries that have been successful, and this is what we're trying to do. So the people with money are looking more for that. And they're looking to know that you have a track record to get it done. They don't want to put their money into something that's not going to get finished. It's really important. If you're pitching it to people to take part, then you want to have a sense of what the story is, and what it means to the legacy that they've carried, and stuff like that. So I think it's a mix, but it's all important. If anyone wants to look at a pitch deck at some point, I could maybe send it somehow. Because I think it's really useful. This was something I didn't learn until a lot later. But I didn't know how to build a pitch for a documentary until we had made 3 or 4 of them. So, and now we do, and now we build pitches for all of them. But it's a pretty important part. Yeah. What's that? For this film? No, just one. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions? We're just about there. One thing I want to ask before you dismiss us. Can I get a show of hands of people who watched Reading Rainbow when they were little?
There you go.
There you go. Thank you, Brad. Thanks for being here.
Thank you all for coming. Yeah.